Jan.
Hi.
Yeah, you wanna introduce yourself? Usually we go like round of introductions. So today is gonna be quick anyway.
Yeah, my name is Jan. I'm working for GData, but at the moment I'm using Headlamp most in my free time. So yeah, that's basically.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and thanks for all the PRs you've opened. The not only in the number of them, but also you usually tackle many things that we either happen to have in our plans or we're thinking of it. So yeah, it's also you do the code very aligned with what we usually like to do. So that's for us that's like very cool.
Yeah, what I would like that my company is switching from Lens to Headlamp, and probably they need some features, so I try to
Okay.
implement them before.
Yeah, definitely. Like we try to get we try to support as many use cases as seems reasonable. So definitely if you have things that are missing in other solutions, we want to have them for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so you know me from at least from Slack. I'm Joachim. I started the project in 2019, but I think we only released it in 2020, and it had like ons and offs with in terms of continuous development. But for a couple of years now, that's what the team does at Microsoft, which I think is pretty cool. And we have Oleg here. Oleg, you want a quick intro you?
Hi, I'm Oleg. Work on Headlamp, do mostly front end. Nice to meet you. Very cozy meeting.
Yeah, that's okay. So you want to jump to the demo, Oleg?
Sure. There we go. So the new feature that we added is the search. In the top bar, we have a convenient shortcut to open it. And once you open it, you can search a lot of different resources, as well as switch between different clusters and also switch theme. It remembers what you searched previously. So if I go to pods, and then back to deployments, it's two most recent pages here. Now it's convenient to switch between them. Obviously, we can search like pods, deployments, all of that stuff. And when you select it, you go straight to it. And it's very convenient to use with a keyboard. So people who use K9S maybe consider Headlamp more with this. And yeah, in the future, I think we'll add support for plugins to also register items to be able to search or just perform certain actions. For example, I can switch dark theme. But for now, it's just a simple search. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a feature we had in our to-do list for a long time. So it's very good to see it finally working. To be honest, I think it would be very difficult to have this done efficiently before version 0.26, because that's when we released with React Query, and I think it plays a big part in having many of the things cached already when we try to search for them, or at least it makes things a bit more efficient, right?
Yes, since we're using all the similar queries here, like for example, the search will load like deployments or some other stuff, and when you go to the page, it's already loaded. Like it will reuse the same stuff here.
I think two things I would like to see, or is that if you search for deployments, that has an icon, but the overview doesn't have the same icon, which is a bit confusing, I think. If you, for example, you search for pod or workloads, you see.
Yeah, so icons is referring to a particular resource, but when you do pods, it's referring to a page.
Yeah, so pod has an icon, but pod's not. So basically, it would be possible to use the same one here.
Yeah, I guess we could add like an icon, so it's the same. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think a different icon would be cool, right?
Yeah.
At least one that shows that it's maybe we have the same icon for all the pages, or maybe it's the same icon as the pod but a different color, so it kind of shows different, you know, because it's not really the pod you're going to see, it's the page of the pods.
Yeah.
The thing is that as far as I know, Oleg, this ingests or registers all the routes, right? Is it including the ones that we register from the plugins? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it'll take all the routes that are available.
Yeah, and at the moment, routes don't really have an icon assigned to them, but we can create a generic one when, you know, when we cannot match them with a better one. So, yeah.
Yes, I have Flex installed, and I can search for help releases page. That works.
Yeah, so I think one of the coolest things is not only just jumping across views, right? Because in the end, if you search for something and that matches a route, that's cool. But also, I think you also are able to change the theme from it. So a couple of actions are available in there.
Yeah.
Right? Did you? I think you changed the theme, right? That's one of the things you showed.
Yeah. So for now, it's like the only 2 actions here. I bet we can add a bunch more, but I just couldn't come up with anything else. Maybe like add cluster or I don't know. But it's easily extendable.
Yeah. And then I think if you click on home, it's move a bit the search, so it's a bit confusing that it's not aligned on the same.
It's not perfectly aligned in the middle. It kind of just tries to set the same distance from left and right. And since we have like a bunch of stuff here, it kind of moves. But yeah, it's a first release.
Yeah. And then also what I would like is like a screenshot, like a shortcut overview. As we know, I think 2 shortcuts or 3 shortcuts could be also interesting to have a shortcut overview.
Yeah, so that's one of the things also that we have marked somewhere to do, because as I was saying, like right now with the search, you can search, but you can also move to different parts, and you can also perform certain actions. I think the performing of certain actions is one of the coolest things to open to plugins, right? Because if they register a route, it will be already searchable. But let's say that they have something like you know, like stopping something or starting something. If we can quickly do that by running this, then this is you know, basically this is a search, but it's also like a command bar, right? And I think that's cool. I think the idea of and like Oleg was saying, you know, I don't think this is gonna convince a lot of for example hardcore users of K9s, let's say, because that's a different space altogether. But I think this opens a lot of possibilities for the keyboard to be used, right? Because you just start typing and you get to where you want to go without having to click around. The shortcuts will be also something that promotes that, and I really like the idea that you just you know, perform a shortcut which should be configurable anyway, and you start doing something. So yeah. Hey Eric, yeah, so it's a cozy meeting today, in part because it's the Thanksgiving in the US. So yeah, I didn't realize that when I booked. Actually, this is like, I think it's always on the third or on the last Thursday of the month or something. So I didn't really realize that. But we did a quick round of intros. But since we're not a lot of people, not going to be here for a long time, just with introductions. But I'm Joachim. I lead the project, and we have well, with the name Faradin, but that's Jan, who has now for a long time contributed to the project with many cool PRs. And we got Oleg, who is a senior developer in the project as well. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I can quickly introduce myself. I'm Eric. I work out of Oslo, Norway. I'm part of a platform team working for the Norwegian TSO. So we manage the high voltage power lines in Norway.
Okay.
So I manage both many OpenShift clusters and many Kafka clusters. And I'm here mainly to ask about OpenShift support. I've been on Slack around that. We have managed to rebuild the image. So we have started some testing in OpenShift. The fixes to the image is probably quite simple. It's just about permissions on the file system inside the container. Because OpenShift has a particular way of running workloads. You're given a unique high UID, and that should be supported by the image. And I think it shouldn't be that difficult to do.
But
So that's our immediate problem. The second thing I wanted to come here to ask about is about we are running shared multi-tenant clusters. So we're kind of in another situation than Headlamp seems to be built for, because it's built for another type of multi-tenancy where you have multiple clusters, as far as I could see. So I was wondering if you have any plans or any ideas on how to possibly support shared clusters where an end user doesn't have access to namespaces, for instance.
Yeah, so I think in there's a couple of things I can say. So the multi-cluster support, I couldn't understand if you said that we didn't support it or something, but we do support it. You know, as you know, the way that the deployment of Headlamp is set up to do is actually thought of as a single cluster in that case, because it's like, okay, you're serving from that single cluster, but you can also pass the kubeconfig var, kubeconfig parameter to it, and you can feed it a kubeconfig with many contexts and clusters there, and it should display even if you're running a deployment of Headlamp. So that's one case. The other thing is we're also working now on cluster API. We're going to start that pretty soon. I don't know if this is something that makes your life easier or not. And one thing that we kind of improved, but I think there's still room to improve is what you were saying about the namespaces, right? Right now, when you go, we kind of assume that you have access to all namespaces. We try to list them all. And if you don't have access to them, you see like a permissions error, and you can work around that by adding per cluster allowed namespaces, right, in the settings. So if you go to the settings, but that's kind of a client side thing. So even if you load your deployment of Headlamp that you prepare for your collaborators, I guess, each one of them would have to set up the allowed namespaces there. Right, this is not ideal, as I understand. So one of the things that we have in the list, but we had other things too, which would be like, if we fail to list a namespace, we know that it's a permissions error and stuff. Then we try to list the default namespace. Default, not the one called default, but the one that is set up as default, because usually that's the one that people will have access to. And yeah, and the other thing is, I think right now, if you want to set the allowed namespaces programmatically, I think this has to be done in you just have to change the local storage setting for that for that setting, but this is not something that is very well documented, so it's kind of quirky at the moment. I think I think that we need to create basically open the possibility for plugins to say, hey, I want to set the settings for this cluster. Those are many settings. One of them is the allowed namespaces, and of course, if your plugin detects from whatever configuration you got that the current role only has access to this many namespaces, they could change that transparently to the user. So the user, when they get to Headlamp running your plugin, they wouldn't even have to set up the names, the allow namespaces, or see an error or something, right? So this is something that some
really
people
cool.
need. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we basically need something the same. We do this with Lens at the moment, so we basically have a Lens plugin which is authorized on OSCD, and then you get like the allowed namespaces. And I think it would be like dynamic cluster would be work for us, but probably if you can also like configure the allowed namespace easily with the dynamic cluster, that would help firstly. But I think also like Prometheus settings, basically our customers or users have access to Prometheus, like accessing directly, but not like searching the namespace where Prometheus is. So basically, if we can provide like settings for Prometheus plugin, then Prometheus plugin should work also. And then one thing with multiple clusters I have, probably someone knows, probably my kubeconfig is broken as shit, and it's had thousands clusters which are not available anymore, and probably then Headlamp stop working. It's just get timeout for each cluster that's available. I'm not sure why, but
Wait, you're saying what?
so I have
timeout?
multiple like kube config, so multiple cluster in my main kube config, and some don't exist anymore or return a timeout. And then if I now access an existable cluster which exists, I get timeouts also for it.
Okay. That could be a bug, because I also have a long list of clusters that I usually just keep in there and never delete. And some of them say they are active because they're active, but then if I click I no longer have a working token, so I cannot get in. Some of them are timeout, so I do get like the bad gateway and stuff. Yeah, but the ones that are accessible, I can enter them. We've been having some people opened an issue, or a couple of issues related to entering certain clusters. I think it was mainly on Amazon ones. So maybe it's one of those. And I think there's a PR currently being tested by Santosh in our team, related to taking the token from the kubeconfig, which is something that was not being done properly when it's in cluster, for example, if I remember correctly. So, but going back to the plugins, yes, there is also the possibility of registering the cluster dynamically. I think we do not have the settings for the cluster open, or at least easy to manage. So that's definitely something we can do. And if it seems like it's a common use case, what Eric and you were saying for the allowed namespaces. So that it should be relatively easy then, once we have that, for a plugin to go and say, okay, let me check with whatever backend you got, or YDC or so, to check what is the configuration for this user. They only have access to namespace 1, 2, 3. Let's set that for this cluster, and you check that from time to time. That should cover a lot of cases. Yeah, let's do that.
That sounds very good. In OpenShift, you have like the resource is called project, so you can list projects, and that will return the project you have access to. So that could also be a source in OpenShift particularly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I actually looked into OpenShift, but like many years ago. I think before I got into Kubernetes, and also so I don't know how different it is right now. So my question for you is like the rest of the things, do they all work? Like, can you see all the resources and stuff?
I mean, as a cluster admin, I have two users. I have one admin user and one regular user. As the admin user, everything seems to work. We haven't started installing any plugins, so it's quite limited what you can see. The main reason for looking at Headlamp is actually that the Flux plugin was created there. We use Flux for all our provisioning. And the VV GitOps, which is the GUI we have been using so far and providing to our users, are pretty much unmaintained. But I'm currently working with an ex-WeWork employee trying to get a new release of VV GitOps, because this was a tool that was working pretty well for our users, because it had the functionality to only display the Flux resources that you actually had access to, considering that you're in a shared cluster. I'm not sure exactly how it's done. I haven't got that deep in the code, but something in that direction would be super useful for us. But what you're describing about allowed namespaces, if you can obtain that dynamically from the user that has authenticated, that would be that would work.
No, I mean, we definitely, and I think it should be relatively easy to also open that to plugins. Usually, the slowness, besides of course maybe other priorities we got, usually the slowness in doing something like that is just to make sure that we get the API right. Because if we just go with whatever seems correct at first glance, sometimes like, okay, now we realize that we're missing a couple of things here and there, and we have to make it backwards compatible and whatnot. So yeah, we should be able to follow up on that very quickly. Yeah, and the Flux plugin is something that we released just quickly before KubeCon, but that's getting a lot of attention, and we got a lot of support from the Flux community, I would say. Also because Ashu, who worked in most of the code there, also did it together with a couple of folks from that community. So we got that. We're also looking into adding this overview for the Flux plugin. And yeah, I think it's something that it's an effort that we want to carry on doing, because it helps also the project. It also helps Flux, and these things go well together. Yeah, and for the OpenShift, yeah, I remember you added some questions to Slack, so I hope that with the allowed namespaces and maybe a couple of things, we can make it easier to use. One of the interesting things that I talked about with somebody at KubeCon was also like they were on Wasm Cloud, and they were like, okay, so is that usable or not? And right now it doesn't seem like it's usable, but at some point we could even think, but this is like long-term thing, even about saying, okay, you know what, the Kubernetes layer, we could make it just one of the layers, and so to make, instead of saying use list, we could also provide other layers of basically to have access to other clouds that are not entirely Kubernetes compliant, let's say, if they have a different API or a totally different way of running things. But these all sound like very cool ideas.
Cool. Could I ask some questions? I haven't looked closely at the source code of Headlamp, so there's some very specific things that I would like to know. Everything that Headlamp does towards the API, it's impersonated as the user that authenticated, right?
Yeah.
So the Headlamp itself doesn't have any elevated permissions. Okay, that's good.
That's on purpose. That's by design.
Yeah, of course. I was just want to check that, because if not, it would be a big problem for us.
Yeah, we have that question from time to time. We designed it initially to follow that way, Yeah, and we have some people that from time to time they ask exactly that question. We also had other people that came and said, you know what, I want to run this for everybody with one view, right? With we're going to get read-only for everybody. I'm going to select what they see, and in that case, it's actually much more complicated, right? Because the UI and everything is prepared to behave a certain way. So if they cannot find a role, then the user will be prompted for a token. If that's not what somebody wants, they have to make sure that that doesn't happen. So in that case, people have to be creative and maybe, work around it with the connection, maybe injecting some token into the requests by themselves as a separate thing, and then Headlamp has access. He thinks that okay, you get access somehow, and doesn't prompt for a token or anything. But yeah, the default way is what you were saying.
My second question would be, is there a concept of read write and read only in the Headlamp? So because we would like to urge our users to use GitOps. So it means they should not be able to click or modify things normally. So it would be nice to kind of having a read-only mode.
So,
is that something you have discussed?
Yeah, so actually the UI from Headlamp reacts to what the role is. So if you have a role where you can, for example, not delete a resource, let's say deployment, the delete button will not even be shown because we check before we show that. That's the same for scaling. That's the same for editing. If you cannot edit a resource, you actually see a view button, not an edit button. So it still brings up the YAML, but it's read-only. The only thing that remains in that UI, if I remember correctly, is the create button, because the create button is like, okay, I don't know what to check if you have permissions or not. So in that case, we could very well use some method to tell Headlamp, hey, this is actually a read-only environment, so don't even display the create button. Because of course we know that it's very likely that, okay, the create button is there, but even if your users will try to use it, it will fail because they cannot apply resources, right? And this is something that maybe will come very soon, because Jan here has an open PR to bulk delete items from a table, which is something that I think it's very useful and complements the the rest of the operations. And we have been going back and forth a little bit, discussing exactly that, like how can we make sure that this applies this philosophy of, okay, if you cannot delete stuff, you don't see the delete button. And this is for the bulk deletion. This is actually a bit difficult because, of course, let's say that you select 50 objects to delete, right? It's kind of complicated to go one by one and check if you got the permissions to delete them or not before we even show the button, because then we'll have like to show a spinner or so. That's not so good. So I think, I think for now, we're gonna keep that feature. We're gonna eventually merge that feature so people can just select and delete. The people that cannot delete, either they know that they cannot, or they'll be surprised that things will fail. And at some point we're going to have I think in my last comment I mentioned that we could create we have the ability of passing this environment variables to Headlamp, so we could pass something to it that says like read only or something like that, or allow bulk deletion, allow create dialogue or something, and then you could tweak those as you deploy your image, right? Because this is mostly important for people that are deploying Headlamp as a service, right? Not so much if you are using the desktop, because in that case, even if you have like a read-only access to some cluster, if you select and it's not, if you try to edit something, you know that maybe in that cluster you cannot do that.
Yep. So I am following what you're saying, and I totally agree. But I have a dream that at some day you could actually configure Headlamp to, let's say, a read-write with full access to what your airbag defines. And you have another mode which is read-only, so it's just looking around, but not being able to modify anything. And you could also imagine kind of an hybrid, which will be a bit more complicated, but where you're allowed to kind of maybe restart the thing, or in the Flux context, you will be able to force a resync, which is not actually changing the state of things. It's just you poke the resource to look into Git again. So it's kind of it's not purely read only, but it allows you to do a couple of things. So
I think it already does that, right? You can already sync from the UI.
yeah, but I would not like to allow my users or myself or anyone to actually modify the resources. For Flux, it's not a problem because Flux is a controller, so it will revert drift eventually anyway. But for other things that you can find in the UI, we in our case, running this as a service inside our clusters, we would prefer to have an option where people are supposed to be using GitOps to do this.
Okay.
So,
but are you saying, but you know, from what I mentioned, that it reacts to your or shows controls based on your role, are you saying that even if you have the role to delete a pod, you still do not want to show the delete button? Is that the case?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I see.
So, I mean, this is a read-only mode, which is configured on the Headlamp workload. So it even if you have the RBAC to do it, it's in read-only mode.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably have something like that. I can also tell you that right now, if you want to have a plugin that does that, that should be very easy, because we have what we call a action bar processor. And so the processor is given a list of all the actions that you got, whether they come from Headlamp or they come from other plugins, and gives you that list and says, okay, here's the list, you can add, you can modify, you can do whatever you want. So in this case, it will be a matter of your plugin processing that list and saying, okay, this action has the ID called delete. We know that that corresponds to the delete button, so you just remove that one. And same for the edit and stuff. So you could very well create your own plugin called read only, and if it's available, it will always hide those buttons for you.
That's really cool. That's a good architecture that I like. If I can implement what I want to happen in a plugin across other plugins and Headlamp core itself, that would be super cool if that's possible.
Yeah, that's what we try to do. So the thing is that probably you'll be finding that, okay, but I cannot delete the create button. Yes, because we only open functionality to the plugins, like we were discussing the settings for the cluster, when we see there is a clear need for that, because otherwise, you know, we have to be backwards compatible. We have to make sure that things keep working whenever we update stuff. So the more things we open, the more responsibility that is. But you know, just like in the cluster settings case, which is very clear a need that we need to add that. We can also add it for other places, like the create button, for example. I think it makes sense.
Super, thanks.
Cool. Yeah, and by the way, the plugins, I don't know if you looked into it or not, but you can register like sidebar items. You can register a sidebar item into the cluster view, like when you are in a cluster, or to the home page, or you can even create your own sidebar, right? So you can eventually have like a whole view with sidebar items that it's outside of those two regular views of Headlamp, for whatever reason there is. And yeah, we try to make it flexible, but of course, trying this balance of how much do we have to support ad eternum in this case. Yeah.
That's super cool. Our other motivation for looking into Headlamp, I mean, OpenShift console, which is delivered with OpenShift, is a pretty good UI, but it's tailored for OpenShift, of course, and we might eventually change Kubernetes distribution at some point in time. So we want our users to mainly use standard Kubernetes resources or any custom resource that is installed by us from an operator that we think is useful.
Yeah.
So to get some more highlighting on what we want our users to use instead of bloating the UI with resources we don't want them to use. It's something that's motivating us.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that makes sense. And you know, another question we always get is people asking, is there any stuff that is specific to Microsoft, you know, or Azure, because we are part of Azure. And the answer is no, right? The project is in the CNCF. I think we're very lucky that we are able to work on this, you know, without any restrictions from the company to tell us, okay, do it this way or that way. We're pretty much choosing how to implement things. But yeah, always with the idea that we want to be as flexible as possible. So cases like you're saying are possible, or cases like, okay, you know what, I want to have a whole area just for OpenShift. Okay, you can totally do that with a plugin or something else, right? That's the idea.
Yeah. Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have also tested Rancher. I don't know if you have tried it. But what I liked about Rancher is that it's actually using the column that is defined in a CRD to show when you use kubectl. And that is something which I find very interesting and very useful.
Okay,
Is that
to
how
show what
Headlamp
I
is
didn't
working?
understand what it does. What does it use with kubectl?
In the CRD, you could define the print columns. It means the columns you will get if you issue a kubectl get or kubectl list command. So it will display the kind of the most interesting information from the custom resource, which is defined by of course, the operator developer.
So what we do in our view of the CRDs is that we also use the additional printer columns.
Yeah.
I think you're talking, if I understood correctly, you're talking about configuring certain things or certain outputs from kubectl by having a custom resource just for that. Is that the case?
No. I'm talking about the same thing. You're using the additional columns that are defined.
Yeah, we have that. We show that.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, we show that, and that's of course because it's defined that's how we should output things, and that's what kubectl does. We tried to in the list views we got for a long time. We had just, maybe we have still a couple, but for a long time we were displaying the columns that we thought made sense. And then at some point we were like, okay, we have to have at least the columns that kubectl outputs when you do the wide option. So I think we have that for most, if not all, of the table views. What we also have is an ability to enable or disable certain columns from you as the user. Just go there. You can hide a few that you're not interested in, and it remembers for the next time. The plugins also have access to that. So the plugins can actually add a column to a table or remove a column. That should be fairly easy to do as well. So let's say that you know, it's not in the end what I was thinking, but let's say that you have a very specific use case in your team that you actually have a config map to define or, you know, whatever other things that you want to print out from each resource. You could very well have that, and then your plugin checks that, and based on that they affect the columns of either all the tables or just one table. So that should be easy.
Very cool. Thanks.
For custom resources, one idea I had last day in my mind was a lot of custom resource they have in the status like the condition, which is defined by Kubernetes. So it probably like have the condition views also. If a resource has like status, just print a condition view. Probably you have to do but allow some checks, but that could be also interesting.
Yeah.
And then one thing for custom resources, is it currently not possible to delete them via Headlamp? I think I get issues with it.
So I think it should be fine. I remember we fixed an issue a couple of versions ago where the deletion was not working. It was a bug that probably sneaked in through a few versions, but we did fix that. So I hope that that is not. But if you find an issue, just open it and say, hey, this is broken, probably broken again.
Yeah, and then I think probably it also fixed with the new like pull request with the namespace. Probably it's not namespace stuff, but I'm not sure. There's like namespace.
I don't understand which.
There's like 2617, I think, could be fixing it, but I have to check it. But also one thing came in my mind was like having links to the Kubernetes documentation for every resource, like having API link to the API reference and also to probably like official documentation how to use it. Would be this interesting or not?
Yeah, so actually we have I think we have an issue about something called user guardrails that one of our junior developers plans to work on, which is kind of that. So the idea is to have a plugin that when you have it turned on, it shows you a couple of things that are useful for let's say new Kubernetes users, right? And I think we could incorporate some of those into into the actual core. Like for example, we could get even from the API, right? We can get the definition of what a resource is, and we could very well have that in a way that is not intrusive to the user. So because I don't want to go there and see what the definition of a deployment or a daemon set is all the time, because I know what they are. But if there is like an info icon or something that if I want to click it and I'm a new user, I click it and I see a couple of things and maybe a link to the documentation, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah.
It could be some issues with the Kubernetes version to link to, but probably the latest will be okay.
Well, I think that the definitions, I think you get it from the OpenAPI server, but if the actual links to the website, maybe we can compute them because maybe they always have like the version in there. Yeah, and for most of the, except for the CRDs, of course, I think for most of the resources, we actually have hard coded the version and the group and all that stuff. We also have ways to say, okay, we can define several versions. So if let's say that you're in beta and now V1 is out, we add the V1. That always checks until it fails. So if the V1 fails because in an older version, we go in and we check the next version. One thing that I like us to eventually get is to go and check actually what is the actual version from the OpenAPI spec for that cluster in particular, and then we would immediately understand, okay, it's V1 or V1 beta or whatever it is, right? So I think there's a lot that we are not doing yet with the OpenAPI spec that we should be doing in the future.
Thanks.
Yeah. So if you want, oh wait, time has passed quickly, but like I usually show also in this call just the release plan. So let me just put this one. Okay, so I think you're seeing my screen now. Is it on?
Yeah, loading.
Okay. Okay. Is it showing now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if you go to the project, these are public, of course. If you go to the projects in Headlamp Kubernetes, you're going to find release and roadmap. This is the next version. I won't go through each one of them, but the big things are The search, which was already demoed here and is already merged. We have this multi-cluster aggregated view we're trying to get in. I'm hoping that we can get something for this version. Otherwise, it will go into the next one. But I think it's pretty cool. I think I mentioned this before, but it's the ability to group clusters together in a group that is just for the user. So if you have many clusters, you're like, okay, these are the test ones. You can create a whole group with that and see all the pods grouped together, bumped together in there, as if you were viewing just one cluster. And I think that's going to be pretty useful for people that have lots of clusters. We also, yeah.
For the multi-cluster, one idea just came in my mind. If you have like two different roles in one cluster, would it be possible to merge them? Like if both clusters are the same, like you can mark them as the same and then they just get merged, but using different like access.
Two different what? Sorry.
So if you have like two kube configs for the same cluster, but with different access roles. So probably just merge them because they have different namespaces they are allowed to access. If it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, right now, when we say clusters in the UI, and maybe this is confusing, but we did it for reasons. We are showing contexts, right? Not clusters. So you can even have in the same cluster, sorry, in the same kube config, you can have a context that points to the same cluster but has a different user defined for it, right? And then if you group them together in this new way, what we call multi-cluster aggregated view, you could bump them together, but of course the UI thinks it's two different clusters. In any case, so each resource, for example, when we aggregate the pods, you're going to see an extra column saying cluster. So in there's going to be the name of the context, right?
So my idea would be like having a magic flag to group them and then hide for these the cluster or something like this.
Yeah, I think we kind of achieved the same thing with what I was saying. It's less transparent, I guess, than what you were saying, but probably good enough. Yeah, one thing we need to also sort out is exactly that, like what happens when you have the same name for clusters. Right now it's like I think it's whatever comes last, but at some point we should have a better control of that. So that's one of the biggest features we're hoping to release. And then the other thing that I was hoping we could also get here is changing the theme. Oh, sorry, allowing the theme to be changed by plugins. So this is one of those that maybe doesn't interest everybody, but right now you can change the logo, but that's the only thing that can be changed in terms of the styling, let's say. The idea here would be to open the whole theme, so you could have let's say you change the logo because you want to display something just for your company, but your company colors have nothing to do with the black and yellow we use for Headlamp normally. So being able to do that would be cool. Yeah. Okay, I think Eric is saying goodbye. We also pretty much at the end of it. So yeah, is there any other questions from your side, Jan or Eric?
No. Just one question. My node shell pull requests. Is it possible to get this? I'm also, you had one request like splitting the whole logic for node exec and hot exec, and then just having like terminal view, but it's pretty like the code is not so readable. I think the whole code of the terminal. So I was happy that it works, but
yeah, that's a feature we want. I know that PR has been neglected for a while, but it's not forgotten, right? It's just it's a complex PR, and that's why I was saying that simplifying the code made sense, because there was like I remember correctly, you had like the terminal receiving a node or the terminal receiving a container, and that's like, okay, you never really exec into a node, right? You're running a pod, so that you just create sporadically for running it with certain permissions that maybe will not work, for example, in when you have confidential containers, as far as I understand. But
that could work or could not work.
yeah,
This
but
feature is also like probably
yeah,
new.
when PRs are more complex, they take longer, and in your case here, in that one, I think I think we were thinking longer than normal, also because I think at some point you're probably busy, and we were like a bit back and forth to update stuff. But of course, it's like let's discuss it and let's see what we can do. The only thing we don't want is to break things or get something in that will be very complicated to maintain, right? But the idea, we do want it, and we want the capability.
Yeah, I think also like for what I see is like I already made the image configurable. So if you have, you can set exceptions that you are allowed to have a privileged container or something like for this certain image. What we have to do in our company to get this work in some way, but probably also you'd want to disable it in some way because it's doing so many. It's also, I don't think it's possible to check it before if it's possible or not.
Yeah, that's
if this works.
Yeah, but I'm sure we can do something that works even in those cases. Yeah, let's let's see if we can go back to reviewing that, because like I said, I think it's something we should support, and it's a cool feature.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's all. Really nice to talk to you finally, Jan.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you Oleg, for the demo. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect.
Bye.
Right.
Thanks. Bye.